Welcome to the Multifamily Investor Nation webinar on due diligence and asset management. We are going to get started shortly. I see a couple people are attending. First off, I just want to note that in the chat section, our team will put up a discount code for our Multifamily Investor Nation conference, which is in a few weeks down in Charlotte. Hopefully I will get to meet all of you there personally. With that being said, first things first, what I always like to do is I'm going to give you kind of an overview of how due diligence from an asset management perspective is slightly different than what you're doing from an investor standpoint. It is important for the asset management team to be deeply involved with your due diligence when you're managing acquisitions, because you need to ensure that all of the assumptions made in the acquisition are included in your plan to roll forward once you take over ownership of the property. So at any time, if you guys have questions, because what I would like to do, give you kind of a high level overview of how we manage our due diligence, and then kind of open it up for you guys to tell me what are your biggest questions and concerns. As some of you may know, I'm the head of asset management for passiveinvesting.com, but in my past life, I've done extensive amounts of acquisitions and dispositions, specifically for like Aimco, the large apartment REIT. So I've done hundreds of transactions, billions of dollars worth of acquisitions and dispositions. So I kind of know this process and how we have to roll it forward. So that being said, what I'm going to do is kind of share my screen with you guys and get into our process now. So hopefully if, hang on, I just want to make sure I am sharing my screen. I'm going to have to ask our teammate, can she see the due diligence Excel file? That's there. Hang on, let me see if I can move it. You still see it? I'm going to go back. I'm assuming you all can see this. So, so basically, I run my due diligence through Excel. A lot of people have online tools nowadays that, you know, the deal path, they have Asana, they have a bunch of tasks that's all there that you can share information with. I'm old school, so I can keep everything organized in one file. And this is how I could manage 100 transactions at a time. It is helpful because what you need to have is in one location everything that you need to understand about the transaction, and starting with just the basics of the property. So when I put together our due diligence list, we start by saying, okay, I want to have everything that we need for the transaction that ties to our LOI and our PSA. So we can go through all of this information. It's all in one spot. In addition, I layer in all the relevant contacts, because we need to have the seller information, we need to have the seller's counsel, title, survey, environmental, everything all in one place. So we bring all this data in so that it's very, very simple for you to manage. When someone says, hey, what's the status of the survey? You can go to this file, click on the contacts, find the survey people, send them an email, send them a call. Again, part of this process is just ensuring you don't miss a step. So that's one of the reasons why I put everything into one file, one location. This works for, you know, $100 million transaction. It also works for a $400,000 4-unit property that you're buying for yourself. The process is the same. And if you standardize the process, you are less likely to have things fall through the cracks. And then from an asset management perspective, when you have all of this information, it's easily transferable over into your operating platform. So I'm involved with the due diligence. I read all the files, I read everything, and then I can then transition it to our management platform with our management team. So that way our due diligence folders just get plugged right into our asset management folders, and then we can add on to those as we expand things like service contracts or switch vendors and things like that, that it just makes it a very, very easy transition from acquisition to disposition. I'm just going to quickly go through a lot of this stuff so that you guys can understand what we do here. Is one of the aspects of the due diligence is I want to assign a person to do every task. So even if it's yourself and you are the only person that is doing due diligence, you still want to say who's doing what task, when are we getting the data, when is it complete, and you can track all that information because you have to mirror what you have in your PSA to what you are tracking. So this list is overly complicated because it covers everything for retail, office space, multifamily. We can use it for storage. It has a lot of stuff, and we can just NA a lot of that stuff because it's not applicable. So the reason why we set it up this way is it gives us a lot of information of who's going to be the person that pulls all of our historical operating expenses, who's doing all of the insurance reviews, who's doing the, like, you know, your claim history. You have to send that information out to the adjusters or your insurance broker to pull that data in. So you want to make sure you have whoever is responsible for that data in charge of it. Requested reports, this typically is exactly copied and pasted from the PSA. So that way I know I don't have to go dig through the PSA. I just take the PSA, find that section for due diligence, and I insert it into this file so that I can quickly check on every transaction where we have what we need. Again, single source data. This is the email data that we get from our property management company when they request information, because they assist us with our due diligence. If you have in-house property management, you would request this yourself, but we have a standard form that is included, again, because whoever is going to be the leader of due diligence for this transaction will have the ability to copy and paste this data because it's standard, and then we customize it once we put it into the email. Again, sellers deliveries, this is actually the list of all the data points that we have. We go through our operating statements, any crime reports, activity, basically all the data that you're going to get from your property management company. And one of the reasons why we want to do this is actually our collection point, that we have received all this information and now we can go through and confirm it. And basically, we want to track to make sure when we've received it, because one of the things that we don't want to have is in Dropboxes and things like that. People can add data to the Dropbox and they try to get away with, oh, we sent you that weeks ago, and then they upload the file and it's like, here it is in the Dropbox. Yes, you can go back and check it, but if you have somebody that's overseeing your due diligence process, they are the ones that go into the Dropbox every day to check to see what data has been uploaded and check off the list to ensure that they've met the timelines associated with the takeover. And I know I'm going really, really quick, so I'll hopefully be able to answer a lot of questions for you guys later. The new thing that we added into our file is kind of the takeover items that you need. And this is for truly part of the asset management function. When we are taking over a property, we need to be able to upload data into our system to start to do our management of the property. So there are a bunch of reports that will have to be transitioned over. This usually occurs during what we would call the dark period, when you shut off the seller's ability to enter data into their property management system, and then you turn it on closing when we take over. So there are a lot of things that happen from an asset management and property management perspective that happen during that typically 7-day period that transitions right before closing. These are all the files that our property management team needs to have in order to turn the property on from an operating platform. Last couple of things are more specific with regard to coordinating with your legal group when they're doing the reviews, making sure that they've looked at all of the contracts, the service agreements. Again, that's one of the things that's missing in a lot of times from acquisition due diligence. Your acquisition team is checking to make sure all the data is there, but your asset management and management team have to ensure that all the service contracts are functional and feasible, and whether or not you want to keep them. Some can be terminated, others can't. So you want to make sure you have that status as you go through. Last thing is insurance, and then kind of our closing checklist of making sure we know when everything is supposed to happen, when, and who is responsible for what. So that in a nutshell is kind of how we run our due diligence process. Now, the unique part of, from an asset management perspective, is you are now operating the portfolio. A lot of times in the purchase agreement, they may not have it may not be clearly spelled out when you can actually start to talk to employees, whether you want to keep them or not. For things like hospitality projects, there are existing staff on site that you want to have the ability to interview during the due diligence period to find out whether or not you want to retain those people as part of your team. From our perspective, we third-party manage most of our portfolios. So when we take over an asset, we are leveraging our relationship with our property manager to tell us who they want to keep on site. That helps lead us to, what the payroll situation is going to be and how we will match up to our underwriting, because we know what we think the payroll numbers should be in our underwriting, and we work with our property management companies to make sure that that budget is there. But when we actually sit down and start to interview people, we may come to the realization that we may have to restaff some positions, or more likely, the seller slipped the B team into the property after they put it on the market, and the quality of the people staffed at the property may not be as strong as you would like. So you may have to find other people, and you want to make sure that you're involved with that, so you know what the lag time is going to be upon takeover. So that in a nutshell is kind of how we manage our due diligence process from start to finish. And it's critical that you guys have, one, clearly identified who's responsible for each aspect of due diligence, who's going to oversee the legal side, the title survey, environmental stuff that's there, who's going to oversee the operational side to make sure that our assumptions or the underwriting didn't miss anything that was there at the property over time, who is going to oversee the HR functions that are there, and then lastly, who is going to be responsible for uploading all of the data into your management system so that you have the ability to hit the ground running day one. And that is part of the kind of big picture of what we do here at passiveinvesting.com, and what I've brought over from my history of doing transactions. I will open it up to questions now, because I've been rambling for a little bit and I need to take a little sip of coffee here. So I am going to see if we have any questions out there. First question I have is the Excel shareable. This is kind of our process. We standardized how we do our transactions over time. So it's kind of my proprietary list. We're using it here at Passive Investing, and everybody else will have their own unique keys that they would want to follow. So I'm happy to talk through people, but we don't necessarily share our tracking file, because again, it's just Excel. It's just the data points that we've built over a long period of time. Okay, where am I located? Well, I actually am located in Denver, Colorado. Even though I work for Passive Investing, which is out of Columbia and Charleston, South Carolina, I oversee our multifamily portfolio, our storage portfolio, which is a little over 1 million square feet of self-storage, including RV and boat storage. I oversee our one hospitality project in Hilton Head, and I am getting involved with our car wash portfolio from an operational standpoint, just basically verifying that our underwriting and our operations all tie together. Okay, I'm gonna ask you guys that are participating a quick question. What are the biggest challenges you guys are seeing with regard to your due diligence? What questions and concerns do you have as you take over a property? And again, this can be for large institutional portfolios or small 1, 4, 10, 12 unit properties. Because again, I used to do that myself as well. Those the risks on those are quite important, because those are typically just your deals and it's your money in it. So you want to make sure that you're overseeing it pretty well. Sellers not having their info straight, especially mom and pops. Yeah, that is hugely important. It is part of the review process that you start during your underwriting. So when you get all of your data together from your acquisitions team or yourself as you're digging into the data, you want to go through and verify and ask questions as much as you can with regard to things that they may have forgotten about, especially the mom and pops. They may exclude certain things because they're doing it at the corporate level. Like, let's say they're mowing the lawn themselves and they aren't including that landscaping charge, or they do their unit paints and turns because it's a 10 or 12 unit property. You still need to understand what that turnover is. And again, having a detailed checklist helps you kind of remember what to ask as you are moving forward. I have a question about CapEx. That's important that you would see that below the line. So you have to make sure that you get all of your reports from the seller that include below the NOI numbers for what what work they've completed over the prior, say, 3 years. Again, whether it's a mom and pop who says, hey, I just replaced the window, and they may put it in R&M expenses, but you could put it below the line into a capitalized item and get the extra depreciation for that. Those are the types of things that you want to take a look at. With regard to future CapEx, when you are involved from an asset management perspective, the acquisition teams may have an assumption of saying, hey, I'm going to go in and we're going to do light fixtures, countertops, and a smart tech package. And we think that's going to generate, X dollars a month in new revenue. So during due diligence, that's when we start to try to pull estimates on our own to understand, one, what the cost is for that renovation. So with inflation being what it is, those costs have gone up. So the standard of, hey, countertops are $1,000 to put granite in. No, that's not the case anymore. You're going to be spending more to put those countertops in. So you want to make sure that you have a source to help provide information on the cost of these items. And you want to update those on a regular basis. So if you're doing renovation projects, you want to keep that data available with your acquisition team to say, hey, here's what the cost of appliances are now. Here's what the cost of granite countertops are. Paint has gone up. So the average cost to paint a 2-bedroom, 2-bath unit has gone from $800 to $1,400. So you want to make sure you have that information so that you can ensure that your underwriting is accurate. And then also, when you are walking the units as part of your due diligence, and I highly recommend that you walk 100% of the units, no matter how large the property is, you just get a bigger team or take more time. You want to have a good baseline for what your replacement reserves are going to be. So you want to look at the water heaters, you want to see what the age of the appliances are, and build a forecasted model for preventative maintenance to help with the takeover. So you know, if you're buying a 6-year-old property, that, hey, a good percentage of these water heaters are now 6 years old, they have a lifespan of 8 to 10, you are going to have to build into your numbers a replacement of water heaters over the next 3 to 4 years that will cycle through. That's critically important to have that master preventative maintenance list so that you know what's coming down the highway as you take over the ownership of the property, and you look at your hold period and say, what am I going to have to build into this deal? And is the standard that the lender requires? So let's say it's a class A 5-year-old property, they're going to plug in $250 a unit for replacement reserves. If it's a B property, the lender may say, hey, you're going to need to put $500 a month in replacement reserves to handle the churn of appliances, water heaters, windows, carpet, etc. So those are some of the other things that you want to look at during due diligence before you take over management, so you have a well thought out plan going forward. Any other questions that you guys have? Because like I said, I would rather help you guys with your issues than just kind of give you an overview of how we do it. Although I do find it helpful. So one question, what are we doing to, questions are rolling in a little quicker now. Digital presence of the property during due diligence. That's actually a really good question. We leverage our management team to include all the intellectual property for the site. So we would take over the name of the property if we can, because again, part of that issue is, let's say you're buying from a national builder, you may have to change the name of the property, and you're not allowed to use it. So like there are builders that have a brand that they won't let you take over, but you will get access to the website and make sure that you have the ability to transition all of that intellectual property over and have it up and running the day that you take over. We leverage our management companies for that, so that way they can make sure all the emails are forwarded to the new website, whether you're using Squarespace or GoDaddy or whoever to be your host, that can all get transitioned. But it's critical that you have all of that data, and that includes things like Facebook Marketplace and some of the smaller Instagrams and Twitters, if all of your facilities have those. Again, on smaller facilities, the footprint may be smaller. On institutional quality facilities, it may be much larger. When you do your due diligence, do you first have to check with new city codes? Typically, we don't, unless we're doing significant renovations at the property that may trigger an upgrade in code. So that is something that you're gonna have to do on a property by property basis and ensure whether or not you will have to do any kind of, if any of your renovations will trigger a code upgrade, that you have to bring it to code. Typically though, you have to do a lot of work at the property to bring something up to new codes. But again, it's a city by city basis, and I would rely on your GC that's running those capital projects to do that type of investigation. One point I would like to bring up when you're doing your due diligence is, from an asset management perspective, you also want to get a feel for the market itself. Typically, what I would do is, on a new asset, I would start at the property and drive in concentric circles around the property until I get 4 or 5 miles outside of it. So I understand what exactly there is around the property. Great resources for getting information on the neighborhood is your local bar, your local restaurant, brew pubs. People are extremely friendly and will give you a lot of background that will help you target some of the things that you need to do for your property. Just as an example, when we purchased our apartments in Nashville, I was sitting at a brew pub and having a conversation with the waitress and explained to her what we were doing. And she gave us great examples of, in Nashville, there's a lot of music writers and you need a collaboration room. Like, okay, describe that for me. And she went through what the collaboration room was. And basically it's just a conference room that has a little extra, sound deadening materials to allow people to test stuff out when they're doing it. We already had a recording studio built into the property that was there, but we converted an office conference room in the property to a collaboration room, and people seemed to really like it, and it really helped out, giving us a little niche that other properties didn't have. And I wouldn't have known that had I not done some of the kind of hands-on market review that is critical for understanding your property. So, all right, let's see, what else do we have here? The existing website or third-party sites have a lot of bad reviews. How do you change or improve? It's very difficult to overcome prior ownership bad reviews. There are ways that you can flood it. You can actually shut down, once you take over the website, you can shut down Google reviews or start from scratch. That each one of our property management companies have done something like that in the past, both for our storage portfolio and our multifamily. What I can do is find out directly from our property management company what process they use to shut down the reviews and restart them. That being said, the best thing that you can do is try to incentivize people once you take over a property to leave reviews, and that way you can get that instant feedback and start rebuilding the profile of your asset. The other thing that's critically important is to respond to all reviews, both positive and negative, with a note. It doesn't take your property manager that much time to do that, but if somebody took the time to leave a positive review, you want to respond to that and say thank you for the review, because it makes people feel that we're grateful for their feedback. A lot of people only respond to negative reviews, which is good, but all that's doing is trying to, it seems like you're just making an excuse for what went wrong and you're trying to fix it. But if you're replying to everything, people feel more like you are listening to what they have to say and trying to address those issues. So it's really important to make sure that you have a standardized process for reviewing the reviews of your assets. Any other questions for people? I'm gonna see what we've got here online. Did I miss anything? Somebody talked about scraping data from OMs and the PSA to populate the spreadsheet. I've seen that. I know we personally use like Red IQ for data, pulling data out of the OMs and the financial statements to populate our underwriting files so that we can underwrite things quickly. One thing that I have found as part of my asset management review process is, and again, apologizing, I'm old. So I actually like to do a little bit of 10 key stuff. So every month when I get reports in, I 10 key in our KPIs into my spreadsheet so that I can confirm, and it forces me to review all of the data and to do it in detail, so that when I look at something and I compare this month to last month, because I'm entering the data into the spreadsheet myself, I notice the variances. I notice the things that are wrong, and it forces me to look saying, oh, our NOI went up by $50,000. What's driving that? So I can see if it's a revenue driven issue or an expense reduction issue. And the opposite is true with regard to if the NOI decreases. While I love automation, it can get to a point where you are just assuming everything is right and you don't have to go back in and check it. And by manually entering in, 10 or 5 or 10 key items every month when you get the reports, forces you to make sure that the data that you're collecting is accurate, and it highlights variances that you otherwise would not see. So I personally like to manually review all this data so that I can see it. And what happens is when I'm actually typing it in, it forces me to pay more attention to the data than just reading a report. Because you're able to see the variance and the changes one month over the next. Let's see, are you finding ways to automate the data input process? Again, we have tools that can upload the data, but again, I find it helpful to be able to manually do that because it forces me to review things. See, last question here. Can you dive into reporting from property management companies and how often you're visiting the assets? Yeah, I can. What I typically request, and this is less due diligence and more asset management here, is I will review the monthly operating statements from every property. I have 5 or 6 key data points that I pull and I key into my tracking sheet on a weekly and monthly basis. That way I can see the trends or what's happening both on our storage, multifamily, hospitality, and car wash. There are certain data points that I will key in to my tracking file so that I can also go back in time and look and say, okay, as of Monday, May 29th, this was our occupancy. Where were we on May 29th of 2022? Where were we 3 months ago? What is the trend of our portfolio? I can see how that flows from one point in time to another. With regard to visiting the properties, well, hey, let me take one step back. I do ask all of our property managers to come up with a variance report. That way I can look at not only the change month over month or year over year and have them describe for me what the issues are, but also where we are compared to our budgets. That is important because our initial budget is always going to be our underwriting. So we start with that, load that up into the system, and then we will compare our actual operations to our underwriting budget. But I also want the management company to let us know if our initial underwriting was off. And typically when we underwrite properties, we're doing it at a macro level. So like the key levels of gross rent, vacancy, repair and maintenance, contract services, those line items, but we don't have the detail behind it. So we need our management company to layer that detail in, and we can see directionally if we're doing the right things. From a management perspective, I visit the properties as often as I can. My goal is to visit at least once a quarter. Whether I do it announced or unannounced, it doesn't matter. There's really not a big difference because if you, back in the day, we would have 6 properties in the market. Once you visit the first one, the other properties in the market know, oh, he's here, go out and pick up the garbage. So a lot of times I will just drive through the properties before I even go in to talk to the property management team, just so I have an idea of what the properties look like. The other key thing I suggest that everybody does is they go and look at their properties in the middle of the evening when it's dark out to find out the scary places on site, and also to experience the property, how your tenants will look at it when they're coming to visit. And that's across the board. You need to go and see the physical asset the way your guests are going to see it. So whether you're going on an announced visit or unannounced, make sure you visit both during the daytime hours and also at night. Okay, we are getting near to the end. I just want to make sure if there are any other questions out there. This is your opportunity. We got about 5 or 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure I don't miss anything for you guys. Apologize, I did a lot of talking, so. All right. Well, I greatly appreciate your guys' time. And again, don't forget that we have our Multifamily Investor Nation Conference coming up in July or June, sorry. And hopefully I will get to see you guys all there in person. And you won't get to see the big halo coming around my head from the window behind me. So thank you very much. And you guys have a great rest of your day.